Hello, everyone. I'm Major Garrett in Washington. Tonight on America Decides. For those of you keeping track at home, it's day 99 of Trump administration, the sequel. And since most sequels draw a lot from the original, the themes often apply. Theme of immigration ran through the first Trump administration. It runs most definitely through the sequel. Today, the president signed an executive order targeting so-called sanctuary cities. Those are local jurisdictions that do not provide local law enforcement support to federal immigration enforcement. That's a topic that's going to continue. Let's listen.
It's quite simple. Obey the law, respect the law, and don't obstruct federal immigration officials and law enforcement officials when they are simply trying to remove public safety threats from our nation's communities.
Short-term Russian ceasefire. It could be a moment, might even be a pivotal moment in Russia's war against Ukraine. Russian President Vladimir Putin announced his intention for a temporary stop in fighting just days after President Trump's one-on-one meeting in Rome with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy. Harvard versus Trump, the feud, it's been going on for a while now between the Ivy League school, the first university in America, and the White House, goes before a federal judge. And what's interesting about that is Harvard wants a declaration as soon as possible. What's at stake? Well, among other things, university independence and more than $2 billion in federal funds for Harvard. And back to work. Congress returns to Washington after a 2-week recess. President Trump met with House Speaker Mike Johnson to map out the future of his tax and spending legislation. I want to start tonight with Willie James Inman at the White House and Charlie D'Agata at the Pentagon. Charlie, let's start with you at the Pentagon. So our audience has heard the term ceasefire for a couple of weeks. Is there anything more meaningful or perhaps important about Putin's request for a 3-day ceasefire than the ones we've heard talked about or proposed before?
Yeah, Major, there might be, but as you're kind of suggesting, you and I have seen ceasefires break down in a matter of hours, never mind days. So really, it's going to be up to the Kremlin to deliver in deed as well as word. During the last ceasefire over Easter, that was only 30 hours, and that was violated by both times. So it's really going to have to be a wait and see. Now, in terms of what does it mean, it can be seen as a positive step forward, or at least meant to look that way, because President Putin has called it a humanitarian gesture. But it might also be an attempt to, like a gesture of goodwill to the Trump administration, that Russia's willing to compromise, to bend, and importantly has the power to press the pause on fighting. Though they've already warned that if the Iranians continue to fight through the ceasefire period, they will return fire and respond in full. Russia and Putin have been personally the target of the Trump administration for the past week. So this might be about positioning, about maneuvering, and more of a message to the United States than a peace message to the people of Ukraine.
Willie James Inman, to you at the White House. As Charlie just indicated, the last couple of days have seen, at least on social media, and even through Caroline Levin, we heard just a moment ago, the White House press secretary, some sense of impatience with the Russian leadership about either the tempo or the tenor of negotiations to end this conflict.
Yeah, that's right, Major. The White House still maintains that they want that more permanent ceasefire. And you've seen the president grow more frustrated with Vladimir Putin. Of course, we saw last week when he posted on social media, said, "Vladimir, stop," using the Russian president's first name after that deadly attack from Russia on Kyiv. Now, of course, over the weekend we did see, and that you showed that image there, with President Trump meeting with President Zelenskyy of Ukraine there in Rome on the sidelines of the Pope's funeral. That, of course, is the first face-to-face meeting these two men have had since that Oval Office blow-up. Now, following that meeting, the president aboard Air Force One, he gaggled with reporters, and he talked about the relationship between him and Zelenskyy, and he essentially said that the relationship was never bad. He called the meeting a nice meeting. But he also has taken time to criticize Russia, saying that he was very disappointed that missiles continued to fly after these conversations had already begun for Russia and Ukraine to come to some type of deal. So this White House, as you pointed out, growing more frustrated day by day that there hasn't been an agreement yet or a more permanent ceasefire between Russia and Ukraine.
And Charlie, back to you at the Pentagon, and it's always difficult to read the tea leaves, but there was a phone call between the Russian Foreign Minister Lavrov and the Secretary of State Marco Rubio, and the Kremlin put out a very dry, almost arid in its dryness statement about what this call meant and laying down a long-term foundation for eventual negotiations. To read it, it didn't sound like anything soon was going to happen.
No, and it doesn't. And certainly Ukrainians are looking at it that way as well. Dmitry Peskov, the Kremlin spokesman, said today, look, we're willing to negotiate, but we need to hear or get a signal from Kyiv. And I can tell you what they're saying about the ceasefire right now. They're saying, look, why don't you do it now? Like, why are we waiting till May? They remind they've tried to adhere to a 30-day ceasefire. Remember, that was rejected by Russia. As for a lasting peace, once again, they know the mood music coming out of the White House. They're running out of patience. They know the Secretary of State has said this is a pivotal week. So the clock is ticking not just on Russia. They know the clock is ticking in Ukraine as well. And even though, I mean, the sticking point has been Crimea, as we've discussed, even though Zelenskyy has sort of a constitutional duty to insist on keeping Crimea, you know, there's a larger and sort of growing understanding Ukraine is going to have to give up some territory. And remember, Crimea fell to the Russians back in 2014, not in this latest round of fighting. So a lot of people are just coming to terms that may have to be the sacrificial lamb in any negotiations going forward.
Willie James Inman, back to you at the White House. On another topic, over the weekend, the president saw several polls, ours, and we'll get to the specific numbers of our CBS News polling momentarily, but several others showing him losing favor, approval ratings down, and leaning very aggressively today at the White House in anticipation of the 100th day tomorrow on immigration. One of the few places where the poll numbers for the president are still comparatively solid next to economy, inflation, and the like.
Yeah, that's right. I think it's no surprise that the White House started their week of talking about what they see as their successes with focusing on immigration. We saw a rare early morning briefing with the press secretary and Tom Homan, the border czar, where he essentially said, had a message for migrants who the White House says are here illegally. He says, you cannot hide from ICE. We're actively looking for you. And one of the things that they use to show some of the progress that they've made is these signs that you see behind me, the signs of and pictures of people who the White House says have allegedly committed crimes, were here illegally. So the White House has put a strong focus on immigration and talking about what they see as successes, part of this 100-day message that they've talked about time and time again. But tomorrow we'll perhaps see them focus on the economy. That's certainly something that the president has seen his poll numbers dip in recently.
From the North Line of the White House, Willie James Inman. At the Pentagon, Charlie D'Agata. Gentlemen, thank you both.